Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're shifting gears a bit. We're stepping away from the big picture stuff, the usual trends, and we're diving deep into something really specific, almost like hyper-specific hobbyist engineering. We've got this project log, and it's just a fascinating look at building something totally custom, when the standard options just don't work.
That's right. Yeah, the source material is called Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 65.
Yeah.
It's by someone just called Ang, published really recently, actually, November 11th, 2024. And it's interesting because it's not really about the fish. It's all about this quest, almost, to build what Ang calls the perfect fish rack, completely from scratch. It's apparently been on their mind for years.
Okay, so that's our mission today, right? To kind of unpack the thinking behind this. Why build this rack yourself? Why spend years planning it? What was the technical sticking point that kept it on the shelf? And how did Ang finally, crack it? We're looking at the why and the how, the motivations, the specific technical problems, all turning a simple storage unit into this detailed personal engineering challenge. Okay, let's get into it. So first things first. The really basic question Ang had to grapple with, why build it yourself? I mean, you can go out and buy metal racks, particle board shelves, tons of options. Why commit to crafting a wooden one? Ang actually says they were captivated by the idea of a custom build for a long time.
Yeah, and that captivation, it seems rooted in a really practical need. It's about customization for space. Ang is super clear on this, the pre-built stuff. It just didn't fit right. Didn't use the wall space well, wasn't the right height or depth for the tanks they wanted to use. So building it from scratch, that was apparently the only way to, quote, tailor the rack to fit perfectly within our desired space. The absolute perfect fit seems to be the main goal, the big driver.
But it's not just about fitting the space perfectly, is it? There's another layer here. The rack has to do its job, obviously, hold the tanks, the weight, all that. But Ang also insists it needs to maintain a neat aesthetic. So it's form and function. It needs to look good, look intentional, not just like some purely functional utilitarian thing.
Exactly. And that really gets to the heart of, like, hobbyist perfectionism, doesn't it? If you just wanted pure stability, no questions asked. You'd bolt together some heavy steel. Angle iron, maybe? Wouldn't care how it looked. But Ang is working right in that tricky intersection. Structural integrity meets designed appearance. How it looks seems just as important as what it can hold. And here's where it gets really, really interesting, because that desire for a clean look slammed right into the physics of it all, created this technical problem that apparently put the whole project on hold. For years, Ang mentions the main technical hurdle. The thing that stopped them for years was figuring out the best way to connect different wood components.
Wait, hold on. For years over how to join pieces of wood. It sounds like maybe putting it off a bit, because the notes actually mention the specific joint they were considering, and it's like the simplest one possible, right? The butt joint. I mean, if this is a serious build supporting heavy tanks, isn't a butt joint kind of, weak for that?
Ah, yes. That's exactly the paradox. That's why it was dormant for so long. And we probably need to explain that a bit. For anyone listening who isn't deep into woodworking, a butt joint is. It's basic. You take the end of one piece of wood, the end grain, and you just press it up against the flat face of another piece, perpendicularly. They literally just butt together. Simple as that.
Okay, so simple, clean lines. Minimal visual clutter. That definitely fits the neat aesthetic requirement Ang has. But structurally, you're saying?
Structurally, for this kind of load, it's pretty much the weakest way you can join them. Yeah. Think about filled fish tanks stacked up. You've got massive downward weight. Sure, but you also get sideways forces, pushing the whole structure out of square. We call that racking. With a butt joint, the strength against that vertical weight and the racking relies almost entirely on your fasteners, screws, nails, and maybe some glue. And end grain wood, it doesn't glue well. Screws going into end grain don't hold nearly as well under constant heavy load, especially one that shifts slightly with water changes. Those fasteners are under serious stress. They can fail over time.
Wow, okay. So the joint that looks the cleanest is also the riskiest for the actual job it needs to do. That makes sense now why it wasn't a quick decision. It's a major trade-off. Aesthetics versus structural safety. Get it wrong, and you've got, a disaster. Hundreds of gallons of water, broken glass. Yeah, that justifies thinking about it for years.
Absolutely. To make a butt joint strong enough for that kind of weight, you have to get clever. You usually need hidden reinforcements. Things like deep wooden dowels, maybe special metal brackets hidden inside, or pocket screws driven at precise angles, often with really strong glues like epoxy or specific construction adhesives that can actually bridge that weak end grain connection effectively. So the idea is simple, but making it work safely. That's where the complexity comes in.
And what's really cool is how Aang supposedly got past this hurdle. It wasn't like they bought a new woodworking book or watched a bunch of tutorials, apparently. No, they went digging into their own past, like self-archaeology. They dug up old photo collections, specifically looking for pictures showing this exact joining method, to my liking and ability, that they'd used successfully before. On something else, presumably?
Yes, and that's the real gem in this deep dive, I think. The solution wasn't learning something new from outside. It was remembering and validating something they'd already done. Aang wasn't stuck on just the name butt join. They were stuck on the specific, probably quite nuanced method of reinforcing that joint, making it look clean and carry the load. Those old photos, they likely show the exact detail needed, maybe how the pocket screws were placed, or a subtle internal brace. Something Aang knew had worked before, but couldn't quite picture clearly enough to risk it on this big new project.
Huh. That totally reframes it. It stops being this abstract theoretical engineering problem and becomes more of a practical, like, memory retrieval exercise. They needed to make the weak joint strong enough, and the answer was basically confirming their own past technique through their personal archive. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit to the timeline. Aang calls this a long dormant project. Says it was shelved due to numerous reasons over the years, which, sounds familiar for a lot of complex hobby projects, right? Life gets in the way, you recognize the time sink.
Exactly. And that brings us right up to the present, or very near present, in the notes. Aang is now thinking about actually doing it, reviving the project. They identify the upcoming year-end holiday as the ideal time,
Hmm.
which tells us two things, I think. One, this isn't a weekend job. It needs a dedicated block of time, probably several days. And two, that main technical problem, how to execute that reinforced butt joint properly, must be solved in their mind now. The roadblock is gone.
Yeah, connecting those dots. The timing seems crucial. Finding that old photo collection wasn't just random reminiscing. It sounds like that was the trigger. Seeing the proof, the photographic evidence that their specific method worked before, that gave them the clarity and probably the confidence, right? Enough confidence to pull the project off the mental back burner and onto the active list.
Mhm.
The engineering puzzle was solved by retrieving their own historical data.
It's actually a pretty powerful insight into, getting unstuck on projects.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer isn't out there in some new manual or video. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself, hey, I've actually tackled this exact execution challenge before, and it worked. It just validates the whole approach and lowers the perceived risk.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this deep dive then. We looked at this really specific example of DIY engineering, a custom fish rack, driven by this intense desire for a perfect fit, optimized space, and importantly, a clean look. But it got stuck for years on one critical technical point: how to make a simple-looking joint, the butt joint, strong enough for a really demanding job, holding heavy aquariums safely.
Right. And the key takeaway here, maybe for you listening, is that in these kinds of passionate hobbies, the real satisfaction, it often comes not just from having the finished thing, it comes from mastering the technical details needed to make it fit perfectly into your specific world, your space, your needs. That pursuit of integrated design, making something both functional and aesthetically pleasing, forces you to solve these subtle but really crucial engineering problems, like making that butt joint work.
Yeah, and thinking about that, it kind of raises a final question, doesn't it, for all of us? How often do we let that desire for the absolute perfect fit, that ultimate custom design, how often does that actually delay projects that would otherwise be really valuable or satisfying? And maybe more importantly, what kind of crucial knowledge might already be sitting in our own archives, buried in old photos, forgotten notes, maybe just lurking in the back of our memory, knowledge that holds the specific key, that technical detail we need to finally break through whatever's holding us back and just get started. Something to maybe browse through in your own digital files over the next holiday break.